Good evening, and thank you very much for participating. And it is so great to see everyone. We are so happy to have everybody here that is here and those that are online that are joining us. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of our members here on the committee and thank them for consistently being a part of this practice, as well as helping support our community. Secondly, I would like to welcome our two new members and congratulate them both on, we have one that is online with us, Alderman Harris and Alderman Lyle. Thank you all very much for committing to this process, especially as much as is needed during this time of outwardly confusion and fear. We know that you all are very knowledgeable on many different things in the community, and we will be depending on you to help give us more insight on how we can better help all the Evanston residents have a quality of life that is sustainable. And lastly, thank you to those who have been hanging with us for the past year or so, or hanging with me at least, for the past year, for always bringing their brilliance and unique experiences to this committee that has made it a committee that is I think, robust in the work that we do here and meaningful and worthwhile. Also, thank you to the staff that is always very helpful, especially to me, trying to put all of my different identities and lives together just to make sure that we stay on target and stay in step with the needs of the community, as well as some of the trends outside of our community. And before I forget it, since I'm a May birthday person, happy birthday to me this weekend and happy Mother's Day to the rest of y'all. But I'm going to have a relaxing weekend one way or the other. But first and foremost, we are going to get to tonight's business, which is very important. And I'm going to turn it over to the staff so that we can verify that we have a quorum here and start on some of the approval of the things that need to happen. As you know, it is consistent with this committee to have not one, but two public comments. We will start this meeting with one of those public comments, and at the end of the meeting, we will have another one in case people were not able to submit their public comment in the beginning. Where are we at? So, as I said before, we declare a quorum and hope that we can now discuss some of the issues. I'm going to turn it over to staff because we want to talk about qualifying. Well, actually, we want to do that public comment.
Yep, actually, Chair Hayes, thank you so much. I wanted to first briefly mention that we do validate parking. So if you came here and you parked in either the Sherman or the Sherman parking, you can validate your parking at the desk right in front of council chambers. I also wanted to mention that there are two restrooms located on this floor. The codes for the restrooms are 2201 for the men's restroom, which is closest to us, and 2202 for the women's restroom, which is down the hall across past the elevators. That was, oh, yep. And so with that, let me do roll call for quorum. Councilmember Harris.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Isles.
Present.
Okay. Ken Rowling. Vice Chair Ngola.
Present.
Chair Hayes.
Present.
And Mercedes Fernandez. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much that we are now deep into our meeting. We're going to get started with approval of the minutes of the past few meetings. I believe, are you guys going to take that over?
So we have meeting minutes from January and March. Can I get a motion to approve? Or can Chair Hayes get a motion to approve?
Yes. If if someone would be so kind to give us the motion to approve the meetings from January 9th as well as March 13th, 2025. Thank you so much. Do we get a second? Thank you very much. We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
All opposed? And one abstention?
The two of us can abstain because we weren't in those meetings,
Correct.
and you'll still have enough to pass it.
Correct. So we have passed those minutes. Thank you very much for y'all's participation. We're getting used to these new digs. We're learning where the doors are, where the washrooms are, where the buttons are, and we're going to get this down pat before the year is out. Next, we have on our agenda public comment. Do we have any public comment online or in
So-
the auditorium?
We have one hand, please. Kristen, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, go
Oh.
ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, committee. My name is Kristen Kennard, and I am the Deputy Director and Director of Social Work Services at the Moran Center. In discussions over the past few months, this committee has brought up and had discussions about the possibility of a co-application model for funding this year. As a representative of the Moran Center who has attended these meetings, I've taken those discussions back to my organization to get feedback from colleagues about this approach. And tonight I wanted to share with this community a few reasons why the Moran Center has grave reservations about a co-application model. We appreciate the committee's interest in assuring collaboration between organizations, knowing firsthand how critical it is to work together, and also knowing that no one place can meet all of the needs of each family we work with. I can attest that the not-profit sector in Evanston is incredibly collaborative. We work hand in hand most days, and we feel that we do not need to use funding to force partnerships. The shortage of social services stems not from a lack of collaboration, but from insufficient funding within the sector. The funding that the Social Services Committee is dedicated to allocating is to address specific identified needs for low-income and marginalized families and individuals in the community. The organizations that are funded by this committee are experts in those particular areas, each addressing different but all important needs. By enforcing a co-application model, we may be diluting those organizations from being able to do their expert work. Finally, the reporting for these funds is extensive. By shifting to a co-application model, it would further complicate reporting for all agencies involved. Not only would organizations have to report to the committee, but they would also have to coordinate with multiple other agencies, identify and work with a fiscal sponsor, tackle issues with data sharing, etc. We currently report out on our partnerships and are happy to continue to do that or answer any other questions related to those partnerships. I know that a decision has not been made to shift to this model, but the Moran Center wanted to provide some of our feedback prior to ongoing discussions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Are there any further public comments from the arena or from online?
Nope.
Given that there are none at this time, we will go on to new and old business upon our agenda. However, please be aware that at the end, before the end of our meeting this evening, there will be the opportunity for public comment again.
Great, thank you, Chair. So with that, I would like to share this screen. I'm so sorry. Give me just 1 minute. Yep. Okay. I feel like this is good. Can everybody see what I have up on the screen now is the case management evaluation sheet that is available in the packet. And I just wanted to pop this up as we start a discussion so that we can go over the criteria and description and see if anyone has any thoughts. I also wanted to share the determination section. So in this far right column here, there's the ability to click and select a preference. The determinations we have so far are requirement referenced, requirement partially met and or partially documented and tracked, or requirement fully met and well tracked and documented. I'd like to say that all of the documents in the packet are draft documents, and so we welcome feedback and input from this committee. We would like to be sure that the evaluation sheets capture the priorities that the Social Services Committee discussed in past meetings. Staff understood those priorities to include basic needs, which is confined to shelter and provision of food. And the other priority is direct poverty reduction programs, direct poverty prevention programs, and not future poverty prevention programs. We're making that distinction in the evaluation sheet, and we can discuss that when we talk about safety nets. But the purpose from staff's point of view of this discussion is that we have fully heard the committee and that we're accurately representing how you would like to review programs in this new application process, and that we're reflecting that in these sheets. So, and we look forward to additional feedback. Okay.
So you've got right now in the packet a scoring matrix for both case management and safety net, as well as matching application questions that have been drafted to match the scoring matrix. We'd like to start the discussion, if possible, with number one, making sure that you're in agreement with what we've stated as far as the priorities, and then specifically discuss the matrix, because the question are going to stem from the matrix. The matrix has been built in 3 different sections for the committee. There is a 4th section we didn't include yet, which will consider administrative review components. We still have to finalize that, and that's essentially meeting the minimum requirement from staff reporting, and we'll discuss that at the next meeting. But the 3 sections that we have currently in the matrix point to serving the target population, as well as best practices, and then budget. And through those sections, we have then different level of questions, and we can discuss, particularly for safety net, there's potential to weigh one particularly specific question to make sure that it addresses your priorities.
Thank you.
Anybody have comments on basic needs and shelter food, as well as the poverty prevention state?
I can't hear.
Sorry, because I didn't push the button, girl. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in support of those priorities. And the other comment I wanted to make was in reference to what Kristen was talking about. And I see on the best practices on the matrix that there's a section called Program Works Collaboratively with Community Partners to Benefit Evanston Residents. And that's more of how I understood the application to be occurring, that, maybe applicants get points for demonstrating their collaboration, not that they have to submit a joint application or report in joint ways or monitor each other's practices or services, but more, and it sounds like this should be easy based on, what we know about how collaborative the social services are in Evanston. Just having a spot to demonstrate that as opposed, I'm not in favor of doing joint applications either. I just want to say that. Yeah.
And I want to add, I feel like we gave a wide berth there of, you could say two agencies are going to partner together and they're going to submit one application together, or you could demonstrate this is how we collaborate through referrals and partnership and longstanding relationships. And I think it really was to encourage but not require collaboration, which I do think, to your point, Amanda, feels like the social service agencies in Evanston should be able to demonstrate that through many ways that they collaborate. I also wanted to say, I love the determination piece of this evaluation. It feels really quite simple and straightforward. So not asked to comment on that, but I do like that quite a bit.
And I wanted to add something about that. We made it specifically as a defined statement so that the committee could discuss and agree on what a ranking is rather than a point, because it felt that that was more subjective. What a 2 or 3 or 1 is less clear than having a specific statement. And we welcome feedback on that as well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. We've had sort of discussion on that in the past. Like, well, I ranked that a 5 because of this versus a 3. And this feels more concrete and easier to say it fully met, it partially met, it simply did not meet, less subjective.
Giving meaning to the preferences at that point. I happen to agree. And am thankful for all the work that you've done. I believe that in the past, we have heard from other agencies that have worked collaboratively with different social service agencies in the city. That's why I think we didn't think it was a hard stretch for that to happen. Many organizations have benefited quite well from working with or in collaboration with other entities for the betterment of the client, of the individual that they're working with. Were there any more comments or suggestions regarding the case management services evaluation or any questions?
I'm sorry, give me just one moment. Councilmember Harris has raised her hand, so it's going to take me a good 10 minutes to figure out how to find
Can
her.
you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right. So I was just wondering, and I'm sorry, there's an echo. I'm in the District 65 building, so it's a echo, and I apologize. I see the 3 determinations, but the blue one, which is my favorite color, it says requirement referenced. So I thought that would have been a point or a good thing, but it seems like that's the lowest threshold.
Yes, that is the lowest threshold. So, and we could change that to requirement not met.
Okay, yeah,
One
because I
of the-
think if they reference it, to me, there's some intentionality about it. So I thought that might have been 1 versus a 0. I'm fine with that. When I first looked at it the first time, I didn't see that as a no points, because if they're referencing it, there's something to it. So that was my comment. Thank you.
It could also be requirement referenced but not met, or I think what you're saying is they might have referred to it, but they did not demonstrate their capacity to meet it or to, it was
Right.
mentioned in passing, if you will, is how I sort of read that. But I even, Councilmember Harris sort of auto-corrected in my head to not met. Like that's what I read. So
Exactly.
maybe the reference but not met makes it more
Yes.
clear.
Yeah,
Yes.
the intent from putting it this way was to clarify that we felt that maybe putting it at not met was a little bit too punitive in a way, or maybe dissuasive. And it's exactly that. It's mentioned somewhere in the application, but there's no specifics around exactly how that requirement is really put in place and tracked. So yeah, that was a distinction. We're happy to change it. We just wanted to make sure that the committee was in agreement as far as what that meant when they are themselves reviewing the application.
Yeah, I think that's what's important is understanding that. And if we feel the terminology not met is not, is so punitive, maybe not sufficiently met or, not sufficient, something like that. If we're trying to not just not say not, as I keep saying it. I don't know. I just, when it said requirement reference, that's not a zero to me, because again, there's some intentionality to it. So I just want us to be able to be clear, and for the applicant or whatever the case is to be very clear what we meant by it. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other input or discussion on that? Please feel free to speak up. Any thoughts on the language that we're going to suggest for preferences that have not been adequate or adequately met, or?
I don't have a comment specifically on language, but I do want to reiterate, last time we had agencies that almost framed their budget differently because of historic approaches by this committee. I feel like you have addressed this in the application with the way that you've worded the language. But I just want to reiterate, if this is a program that, or a funding stream that is truly supporting that program, and should it decrease or sunset, we as a committee want to know that. And we don't view it necessarily as a negative if we are a large portion of your funding stream for that specific program. So I just want to reiterate that, because I do remember a couple years ago, there was some debate and discussion around how each agency framed their proportion of their budget. So I just want to reiterate, if we are a very large proportion of your budget for a specific program that you are coming to renew, just tell us that. We don't view that negatively, but it is important to know that and take that under consideration and advisement when we are considering funding. So I know it's a little shift from years ago, so I just want to reiterate that component of at least my view, and I thought the committee's view generally.
Input from staff.
I would like to get confirmation from the full committee, because one of the reason why in the past that could have been a challenge was the possibility that the program was solely or in vast majority sustained by city funding, and the potential for them to stay sustainable depending on what city funding is available. So I just want to make sure that this is the direction that the full committee wants to take, so we can make sure it's reflected in the sheet. Because I don't, we may have to take a quick look at how we worded things, if that's the case.
And I was also going to say, I appreciate that comment, and please know that staff does hold a mandatory pre-application meeting with potential applicants to talk about the reporting requirements and the application process and everything sort of soup to nuts. And based on past application cycles, we will be dedicating several slides to a program budget versus agency budget and how that will be reflected. Staff will be using the agency chart of accounts so that we're asking agencies to report their program budget based on chart of account line items, both from the funding and the expenses. And that's what we'll use to confirm, like to track their spending and if there are any changes to the program budget. So staff will be stressing that in that mandatory pre-application meeting so that agencies know.
And I can clarify what I meant. It was sort of in the way you framed, or a loss of funding would significantly reduce the number of Evanston residents. Like that's what I thought you were attempting to get at.
Yes, you're right.
I'll just say that if you wanting, confirmation from everyone, I confirm that I agree with that, so.
Yes, sir. Push that little button.
So I would just like, I'm not sure I followed that. What the clarifications, would you just restate that? I think I followed.
So what I'm referring to is a few years ago, there were agencies that sort of reported at their agency level rather than their program level. And part of, I believe their reasoning was they didn't want to demonstrate that that the city was maybe a larger proportion of their funding. These are care management programs that we've asked them to create. So it's not all that odd to think that we are a large proportion of their funding for this program because we've specifically are funding and almost requesting that this be created. And so, I'm probably saying the wrong. Oh, yes, go right ahead, Jessica.
I'm sorry. So there have been programs in the past that were created in collaboration with the city, but those are very specific programs. It applies to just one or two. Also, in the past, the city requirement has been that city funds be no more than 30% of the agency's program budget, or that if they were more than 30% of the program budget, we just wanted to, the mental health board before SSC just wanted that information, but it wasn't necessarily weighted or ranked or seen as a mark against the agency. So
Yeah, and I will say, the city is usually very welcoming of the services existing, but doesn't necessarily want to be in the position of asking to create a service because then there's a specific funding requirement. We can't ask organization to create funding without ensuring sustainability of funding and putting them in a difficult
My words
spot.
were imprecise. But for care management services for Evanston residents, it would not be abnormal that the city funding would exceed 30% of their budget for the specific program of care management services for Evanston residents. And so I think what I was hoping to convey in an imprecise manner, but trying to clear that up, is that if this city funding is above 30%, I do not see that as a negative, and to just convey that as your actual program budget versus your agency budget. Because if I'm remembering, I don't know, 2 years ago, when we saw we were like 1% of the budget, the position of the committee was, then you could absorb the loss of this funding, which conveyed sort of a different position. Did I say that precise enough?
Did that clear?
I think you're touching exactly on the issue that was the kind of switch. And it's definitely something that we've heard loud and clear from the committee is the need to clarify with the agency and obtain program specific budget and not just agency budget. And for the committee to review the application for the program and not necessarily for the agency's purpose at large.
So I think I do have another issue about this that I'd like to raise. I thought Marion, you were referring to the sustainability of a program beyond, would you just
Yes,
say that again? Because I think I
sure.
have a response to that.
The reason why I was answering that specific statement about the city asking for a program to be created is because the organization should be independent as far as what program they see is needed. They're coming to apply for funding. Usually it's not their sole source of funding. As funders, we usually don't want to be in a situation where we're forcing, in a way, an organization to create a program. particularly if we're only committing to 1 year of funding. It's a huge investment for an organization to start something. And so that could create big challenges for them and for this organization to
Yeah.
push such requests.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that, the clarification that you clarified, Sam.
Program versus agency, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was
Are there any
understanding
other
correct.
questions or inputs that could help in going through this evaluation process for agencies and programs that have come to each one's attention?
I don't have a question, but I have a more of a comment. I'm wondering, or a question actually to staff. And maybe it's a question to the agencies, the organizations that apply for this funding. Are the requirements that we're outlining here for applying for money, are these the same requirements that these organizations face with other funders, are we asking for specific information that is not normally part of their application process, I guess? What's behind that is that I'm coming from the funding world and come from the fund seeking world that I've spent about 40 years in. You know, the burden of trying to of responding to a particular source of funds, you know, of applying for a particular source of funds, is when it's different than requirements from other funders, is just it's so heavy on an organization. And I'm just wondering how streamlined or how compatible, I guess, is our application process with what these organizations and agencies have to go through elsewhere.
Yep, so that is a great and nuanced question, because agencies, as you know, apply for lots of different funds. I would like to think that the number served and the demographic information is sort of across the board. My short answer is I don't know.
So
But
that's
to-
fair. I still think it's worth then, like when you're meeting with the applicants, to
Mhm.
ask, you know, to ask for their reaction to this, to what we're asking for, you know.
Yep.
I just think to get some reading of that, so we're not putting people through hoops for usually a fairly small portion of a large agency's budget. And I just, it's the burden of applying and reporting and all of that. So
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think it depends on the level of information this committee would like to see. So I think what might be harder for some programs to report would be information about like target populations. So it's just up to the committee whether we want to ask those questions or not. But I could try to get more information from the best practice would be a universal application sheet that could then not only go to the city of Evanston, but District 65 and Evanston Community Foundation, you know, United Way. That would be the gold standard. I'm not sure how.
When I read this and I felt like we're asking open-ended questions that allowed, from my vantage point, that these agencies could use the data they've pulled from other applications and sort of tie it in. Like, we weren't asking, other than demographics, which I do feel everyone's asking for number of individuals served. We very much want to know number of Evanston individuals served. They likely have addresses. That feels, you know, concrete. I think these agencies have income and race and ethnicity information and language. I think that all feels very standard. And then the other questions felt like there was room for them to use the data that they have to demonstrate how they meet those criteria. And it wasn't so specific that they had to go create sort of analytics to answer it, that they could demonstrate their capabilities in an open-ended fashion. So if United Way asked one way, they could likely adjust their past answer to sort of answer this question. That's how I read it, Ken.
I would have to agree. I know that we have talked in the past during grant sessions about issues of language access and things to that nature. I think that, and maybe staff can tell me differently, but I think there is a trend to, as Ken knows, to this whole grant writing and requesting funds type of scenario. And one of the things, many of the things are that you're able to present your numbers because you have them for not only outside entities, but inside entities for auditing or whatever else is necessary. So I don't think they're hard. That I think that we're asking the questions that other entities are asking as well, is what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
Can give you an answer from a small organization's perspective. I work for Interfaith Action. I run the overnight shelter. I provided the numbers that you got last year. It wasn't very hard. And we don't do a lot of applications. This might be the only grant that we get. The rest of our funding is from private donors, and it probably took me 20 minutes maybe to get the data that you needed about the participants that we serve. So I don't think it's a particularly high bar.
Are there any other inputs? Do we have someone online that people would like to share regarding this packet that we put together? Oh, it's your turn. Yeah. So that, or questions that came up in reviewing this particular packet and how we're going to address those agencies that are coming to us for this next session. Because the goal, and correct me if I'm wrong, the goal is for us to get this packet consolidated so that agencies and organizations will have more time to submit, review, and present their information and correct it if need be, if necessary, if it doesn't address the questions that we have. Y'all just don't look at me now. Y'all can say so.
I had one tiny potential change.
Tiny is good.
Okay, great. We use the phrase cultural competent. I think culturally humble might be more. That's what we've been using more lately. Is you can't be competent in somebody else's culture, but rather humble and practice humility and sort of a recognition of the excellence of all cultures. It's very small, but it is something we're trying to address within our corporate culture.
Any other suggestions or ideas regarding sensitivity, staff?
I have a different question for the committee. So I just want to make sure that everybody has provided feedback on this topic. Or so one of the question I have for you is, we have the 3 sections, and each section is divided by multiple kind of requirements or criteria. I would like to get some feedback from the committee as far as our intention was to potentially assign a certain amount of points per question. We haven't quite settled on this because we wanted to get feedback from you all first. But as you look at those sections and the eventuality that, let's say, couple points could be assigned, but even number of points could be assigned to the sections and to the number of questions. Are you feeling confident that this is the right number of questions and structured correctly? Because I will play a part in the scoring.
The one thing I want to make sure I understood, are you thinking each section would be equal or each question would be equal?
So each standard question that is not weighed would be potentially equal. And then we can discuss which one we want to boost because they're in line with your priorities.
That makes sense. I just wanted to make sure if you were weighting sections equal, like each were worth 10 points or something, then the budget questions could potentially push out competency, which I wouldn't
Right.
want, but it sounds like that's not the,
No,
perfect.
we could discuss whatever way, we left it very open. We could discuss whatever way. Our initial intention was, yeah, potentially, let's say 2 points per question. So the first section is maybe 14 points and the second section is 12. But generally speaking, I just wanted to get some feedback about the concept of each of those questions essentially counting for as much as the other.
And was there supposed to be a fourth section, fourth section? I'm sorry.
Yes, there is a administrative review section. We have discussed the question, and it's a lot more about timeliness of reporting and kind of like the management of the grant, essentially. It may or may not be assigned points. It could also be kind of a more of a pass, meet or not requirement. We will come back with that specific context and more detail the next meeting. We really wanted to focus on what the committee was going to discuss and review and kind of test out how that works for you.
I like the sections. I think they're, they do address the things that we've been talking about these last couple of months. I think the question was, would we be in favor of equal points? Or I know we may have some discussion about weighting, but otherwise, yeah, I think offering some points in each section makes sense. So I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
general feedback about how it's structured and the number of questions and how that could fall or
Yeah,
yes.
I think it's really comprehensive. So I do like that. I like the number of questions. And I also like that there's the open-ended literal questions outside of this rubric that agencies can provide more context in. So I like the rubric and I like the questions. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
It felt very responsive to our discussions. Like
Mhm.
that, I think you're not getting as much feedback because I think it sort of just felt it's an appropriate length. It's getting the information we need, but not in such a cumbersome manner that we're hoping that, agencies are doing backflips to provide it.
Right.
It feels very responsive to our past discussions.
Good.
And it's answering the question, yeah.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Harris had her hand up.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Okay, sorry. So I do have to drop off. I have a community meeting. I had mentioned earlier to the staff that I had to go for an 8 o'clock meeting and people are starting to come. Thank you so much. I hope to not have other conflicts that will interrupt with this meeting, but we did have a situation that I have to deal with. And I appreciate being on this committee and look forward to the work that we do. So I didn't want to
We
just drop
appreciate
off
you.
and you didn't know why.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris.
All right,
Thank you very much,
all.
Councilman.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Donna. So, we are where we left off at was answering the question, the weighted points, the reviewing of the programs, the questions themselves. And I have to agree with you, Committeeman Fry, that that's probably why you're not getting a lot of comments at this point, because it does answer the questions that we brought up in previous meetings and conversations about how best streamlined way to get agencies to respond to the information we need to hopefully be able to assist everybody in assisting everybody.
Great, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate it. Marion worked really hard. We both worked really hard on this, so thank you. Could we then take a moment and look at safety net, the safety net evaluation sheet? I wanted to call attention to one of the criteria under the services and community partnerships. It's the first question under that section. And it speaks to identifying the category of services. Instead of selecting 3 options, we have 4. The first being basic needs and direct poverty reduction. The second being crisis prevention or interruption. The third being long-range poverty prevention, and the fourth is enrichment or engagement. So we have in the past, as you know, had a wide range of services. The committee did select provision of basic needs, food and shelter as a priority. So I don't know if we want to get into ranking, but we sort of thought that that could be one of the options. The second one being crisis prevention or interruption, which was how we were defining safety net services when we first moved toward this model of the 3 buckets. That one could be for, fewer points or ranked a little bit differently than the basic needs. Long range poverty prevention, we've seen that as like. Yeah, go ahead, Mary. I see her wanting to.
So we're specifically wanting to get feedback on calling out the distinction between direct poverty reduction, which would be like a subsidy or a childcare for somebody that's looking to get employment, or a workforce program, something that's going to be an immediate action versus something that maybe is more long-term, an education program, a scholarship program, something that's working with the youth that could lead to poverty prevention in a way, or reduction, but is much more long-term. And we wanted to hear feedback from the committee as far as how you would potentially rank those buckets, because that could determine how we approach the scoring. What we're suggesting in this model, and it's kind of food for thoughts for you all to discuss, is the tier 1 is your specific priorities, basic need, direct poverty reduction. The tier 2 is the crisis interruption based on that definition. The tier 3 is the long-term poverty reduction prevention, sorry. And then the 4th tier is basically anything else. And we'd like to get some feedback. There doesn't need to be 4 tiers. It doesn't need to be in this order. We just wanted to prompt a conversation about this.
Well, let's let it marinate for a couple of seconds. One of the things that comes to mind is when we're talking about immediate time levels, we're talking about programs that would address a food disparity that day, that time. When we're talking about reduction, are we talking about an organization that would provide rental assistance for the next 3 months versus a different time level? I mean, are we talking time levels? Are we defining time levels? Or you're asking us to define timing levels, or are you asking us to define something else?
I think it's up to the committee. The concept was potential of an investment into a future improvement versus something that has an impact that is short-term. And short-term could be a year, but we're
Mhm.
talking about something where there's not necessarily going to be result right this minute, but it's an investment.
I'll worry a little bit about this structure of ranking, because like if I'm understanding it right, and I very much could not be, it's almost like blue is 4 points, green is 3, yellow is 2, red is 1. Am I generally, again, high level thinking about that right? What I worry about is there could be a very effective program that is a long-term program. And it would be very hard, if that were our ranking, for that program to maybe earn investment dollars from the city, even though it were very effective, had a long track record, was collaborative, just because of how this scoring is set up. I prefer the simplicity of the care management, which I realize is a little bit more simplistic in terms of it met, it didn't meet, and then almost which one did it meet? Like, I think these are the 4 things we were looking for, but by ranking them in that way, I guess I care more about the effectiveness of the program rather than is it a long-term investment or is it immediate? Like, there could be immediate programs that have not demonstrated an effectiveness. And to me, that is not worth more than a long-term program that has demonstrated results. So that's how I'm thinking about it. First blush as I'm understanding this.
Ken?
Yeah, I would actually go away from scoring it as points and just use those as descriptors of what the programs, your assessment as you review the applications, where do these lean, but I would not put a value point system on it from my perspective. Yeah.
So then can we define, so what it's great because part of proposing this was to get feedback. So what I'm hearing is potentially basic needs and poverty reduction all together, whether it's reduction or prevention, where it's immediate or long-term, would be a criteria. And then what about everything else? So is it kind of a binary? Does it fit in this bucket or not? Is there anything below that? In between?
I mean, the agencies get to decide if they fit, right? And like if they're going to apply, maybe they have a long range poverty prevention program. I guess to me, it feels a little less important to make it like a binary. Like I think all of these do have value. And I was struggling with the question and but I think Samantha did articulate it in a way that I agree with. Maybe naming it so we can see, are there a variety of programs that we're funding? But I think that there could be value in a variety, and we don't necessarily want to put all the money into one particular type of program. So, so I don't know. I like the categories as opposed to just having 2. I like the 4. And if we're just naming what they are, I suspect that the agencies would sort of be naming them as well, right? I mean, and they're seeing themselves fitting into the criteria of a safety net organization or a program so that they would apply, right? I mean,
yeah, I think the way, so the way we structure this question, most likely they will know and will figure out where it fits. I think staff is looking, because you've set some priorities, our approach was to potentially weigh this question quite a bit because it's been stated by the committee that the priorities would be basic needs and poverty reduction. But we also aware that there's benefit in a certain diversity. So we wanted to have some tool that helps as all applications are reviewed, and maybe there's 14 applications that are doing really good on everything else, but a couple of those are essentially what's going to make the difference, giving the opportunity of the scoring tool to be able to boost those types of services based on the committee priorities. So we can make them this is this is that, but we'll have to assign some kind of, is this a criteria that's met or not? Is this a point or not? And if we were to boost this question to make sure that maybe it's not a binary, if you don't get full points on this question, you will not get funded, but more like if you get the full points, then there's a little bit more of a chance you're at the top of the list and prioritize based on the committee's direction. So that's really kind of the nuance on that question.
I think I misunderstood your
Finding the balance in having an opportunity for some diversity and yet finding a way to be able to sort through that to make sure that you have a tool that's helping in making those decisions. And we don't have to have the answers tonight on this specific problem. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that because my brain's still cooking. My concern with the numbering, is that what is a 2 to me won't be a 3 to you?
Right. Like I'm worried, like to
That's
me,
throwing me.
I don't know, like this thought of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, like that idea. I don't, there's no doubt that we need emergent responses right now, right? And like services that are just interrupting crisis. But I worry about how, like if I'm understanding this right, like how this is framed is like, but that might be at the expense of long-term investment. And I don't know that that's where I'm at.
Long-term
And that's-
investment still has value.
It does. And part of the reason why, to be completely honest, I didn't suggest it as a second tier is because I wanted to elite some response. I wanted to get some feedback around, that doesn't feel comfortable, maybe, because those are really, really difficult decision to make. There's no program that has applied historically that doesn't have a value.
Right.
And finding ways to be able to sort through those programs can be really challenging. So what I'm hearing from the committee is maybe a potential model where there is this a basic need or poverty reduction, including the investment part? So removing that third tier essentially, or not, that could be a criteria. And that could be kind of a point boost essentially. And if you want to be able to have an additional layer to be able to sort through every other application, because there could be a very wide variety of application you haven't seen so far, we can discuss having a second layer. Our suggestion for that second layer was kind of the initial definition of what is a true safety net program, the crisis interruption, to help make that decision. We can keep that, we can remove it, it can be something else. It's just something to chew on, because that we don't know how many applications we'll get. And if you have 25 programs that are performing really well, we know there's a lot of good organization in Evanston that are performing really well on other questions. Those questions might help you make the difference.
Yeah, what I found in the application, like reviewing these questions, what I felt was sort of like maybe missing, or maybe I missed it, is like how or demonstrate your past success or the ability for you to meet basic needs, have long-term poverty prevention, crisis interruption. Like, I think it's sort of implied, but there's not a question where we're just sort of like asking, show me how, or show me your track record, which to me is quite important. And some applicants could weave it in, but then I think it becomes more of a subjective, like, did I notice it, or did I read it that way? Whereas if it's a direct question, we're asking them, and it might be less subjective in the review. So that might be an addition.
Alderman Isles, Ken, you all are thinking really hard over there. It's kind of hard. So those at home understand this is kind of hard. Any ideas, suggestions, more comments?
You mean specifically to what Sam just raised?
Yes,
Samantha?
yes. And your own reaction to what staff is requesting.
Well, I'm that the earlier discussion about are these rankings or descriptive, I'm comfortable with just leaving that set, I think, at this point, given the conversation here. I think, Samantha, your point of getting some history or some, assessment from the agencies and how they feel the agencies and organizations, how they feel they've had an impact. I think it might be good to have that. I can't remember all the questions, but it might be good to have that sort of an explicit question of, your assessment of your impact or something, just an open-ended question to give people an opportunity to tell their story, to tell it in a paragraph or two, and just what, I don't mean this to be in a crass way, but what difference did our efforts make in this community as we see it, as we think about it over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, however, 5 years, however long we've been in existence. Yeah. Yeah. I look at all these questions. There are many. I see these as just trying to ferret out from each applicant their story and how do they operate and what are they trying to do. And so if they were to write a long, I don't know, I'm being arbitrary, a one pager that just sort of incorporated the responses to 10 of the 26 questions or something, that'd be great. It's having to fill in a blank underneath each particular question, and these questions are linked. So anyway, so I'm for getting a narrative that that has something more than rhetoric, right? But that is mission driven, and that says this is what we've been doing, and having people telling it, having organizations tell it in their voice and in the way that they think about how they're impacting that.
This is very interesting feedback. I'd love to get to discuss that. The question that we've written to match the scoring matrix was essentially, our hope was to try to accomplish giving enough room for organization to tell their story while specifically addressing question in a clear manner, so the committee could look at a criteria and look at a question or 2 or 3 and really make the same connection and look at the same information. Some of the feedback or patterns we've seen in the past is when everything was provided in more of a long narrative form, committee member would know some things and not others. And so when conversation was happening, they were not always on the same page because they had noticed one thing, but not everything. So it's really helpful to get feedback on whether that kind of balance has been accomplished, because we don't want to make it too onerous on the organization. We want to leave it open-ended, but we also want to make it easy for you all to be able to kind of walk through it and get the answers you need quickly, or at least efficiently, if not quickly.
And if I could, I'm sorry, no, it's me. If I could add to that, the way we look at safety net services, it's challenging because they're so diverse. But we ask agencies to report either the hours of the safety net service provided, so how many tutoring hours, how many hours of legal counsel, or the number of tangible items provided, the number of meals, the number of, no, that's like hygiene kits. But if there are other measures that maybe we're not catching, this would be a good time to kind of suss that out also, because, again, everything is in draft form. And so if there are other ways to measure safety net services, that would be great to hear.
I was only going to say, Marion, listening to you in contrast to like a longer narrative versus the specific questions that are optional, people can address them if not, but I really appreciate that they coincide with the rubric, because I do think about, as I was reading this, I was like, I could really see myself using this and making a decision. And I think your point, in my opinion, is well taken about the narratives. People do pick up on different things. I do that, and it is harder to read, and it takes longer to like suss through what's really are they meaning here and what's the most valuable piece. So I do appreciate the way that this you have formulated this and making it more sort of consistent, the open-ended questions and the rubric. I do like that. And I think if an agency does want to provide a narrative, some kind of they can, there's room for that because it's open-ended, and there's nothing wrong with doing that, but some may not need to do that and some may not want to. And I think it's nice that it isn't mandatory in that way.
Alderman, did you have something to?
No, it's clear you've worked on this really hard and you've incorporated feedback. You know, I read it for the first time last night. And when I was reading it, I was thinking of it mostly as a person who would have to fill this out, not as a person who would be evaluating it.
Mhm.
But I appreciate hearing your perspective of what you're thinking about as you create it. And I do think you've struck a good balance between the amount of time it takes an agency to fill this out and the amount of time it takes us to be able to sort through it and make a good decision. And you know, you have to find that balance as a staff member. And I think you're there. I think most of what I've heard are sort of tweaks around the edges of it, and nobody seems to have any issues with the core of it, which shows that you've done a good job.
Do you have something you wanted to add, dear?
The whole
Hey, the
process.
thing right here.
I'm still trying to understand the whole process. It's kind of complicated. So I'm listening from the experts.
I would have to agree that the opportunity to have a narrative or an expanded narrative, my concern is, as you had said earlier, the projecting, me projecting what I think I'm reading or should be reading from the agencies versus what they're actually saying. So that's why I'm comfortable with the questions as they are, to narrow down that scope and keep me keep me in a box as to what we're trying to address and ask of these agencies and measure with these agencies. That's my input. And yes, they can write a narrative if they feel necessary outside of, but what I really want to make sure is that they answer this so that we can get to the nitty gritty. Can I say that? Yeah. Oh, thank you. So we can get to the answers and the nitty gritty of the answers. So I'm not opposed for them to write a narrative if they feel that that's a necessity to better state their case, but that is in addition to and not in substitution of.
We have in the past talked about as a committee of wanting data. I think just encouraging or sort of reminding the agencies of that, because this is very narrative. It doesn't specifically call out that. So in the education and that the mandatory training, whatever we call it, maybe sort of emphasizing that the committee members want to see data and want really specifics, want those nitty gritty details, could be helpful. I'll also say like 2 paragraphs with a lot of details and less eloquence is like more important to me than like 5 pages of beautifully written language that doesn't give me any details. But maybe it's just because I have 3 kids at home.
Appreciate the time. Were there other things that needed to be recovered from the aspects coming from staff? Like to bring our attention to?
No, I think it sounds like the committee is looking to maybe absorb some of what we discussed. You're welcome to provide additional feedback by email between now and the next committee, because we'll keep working on this. And then we can maybe pick up the conversation around specifically the weighting of the questions and assignment of scoring in a way. I think really we wanted to walk away with feedback on specifically the matrix. It's great to hear that, generally speaking, there's not a ton of changes to be made, because that makes the committee's work easier, because that means we'll be readier for next committee. we can make those changes. We can update some of the application questions to make sure that whatever was added or changed in the matrix is reflected in the application questions. You're welcome to discuss anything else or go in more detail on the application questions. I think at this point, I feel pretty good about the amount of feedback we've gotten, Jessica.
Yeah, no, I agree. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so since we are at that point in venue, please feel free to email or contact our beloved staff members here at the city with any additional questions or comments or suggestions. Thank you guys so much for allowing us to continuously have input on this process. This is not an easy process, and it changes from year to year because outside forces change from year to year as well as inside forces. With that, I would like to ask if there is any conversation or public comment, because we are at round 2 of public comment for this evening's meeting. We have a hand up. Ms. Brown.
Anne?
Hi. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for all of this work. It really looks great, and I think it will be excellent to just have the clear criteria. So thank you for doing all of that work. And then I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So the committee has prioritized basic needs and direct poverty reduction programs, but continues to welcome grant applications from other programs, so mental health, substance use disorder, and other kinds of programs. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think I have to answer that, right? Hi, Ms. Brown. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we are still open to other entities as you've listed. One of our major focuses we brought up with poverty and immediate crisis services was a very big thing because we were looking at how grant receiving was going to possibly be affected in the upcoming years. And we knew that there were people who were being marginalized as well as in need of extra resources or resources, period. So you're exactly right. We are not saying no to others, but we did articulate to staff and to the other agencies that those were the financial literacy and sustainability was a major issue for what we thought was coming up in the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have another hand up? No, no, no. Is the, and we don't have any public comment here from the audience. Everyone's online. Thank you very much for your patience this evening. Thank you for your involvement and your questions and your positive energy input as we try to make it through this next session of receiving grants, receiving applications for funding, as well as hopefully giving aid to those agencies who give aid to our community. Thank you guys for the work that you do that many people don't see or hear about. We hear and see you. And thank you to the committee for all the hard work that you do. With that, I'm going to, and staff. We can't leave out staff because they work diligently to get this together and help us all make sense of it for everyone, agencies as well as committee members. With that, I will ask that we adjourn. And everyone have a safe and good night. Enjoy your Mother's Day. Love hug on your mother or somebody else's. And we will see you next month.
Thank you.